Hello there. Thank you so much for joining us. You're watching News Channel Nebraska. My name's Eric McKay. Let's take a look at our top headlines today. We begin in the state Supreme Court, where a Grand Island man's murder conviction is being upheld. The state's high court on Friday issuing its decision in the case involving Donald Anthony. He was convicted of stabbing to death Saeed Farah at a Grand Island apartment back in 2022 and sentenced to life in prison. But Anthony appealed, arguing in court documents that the judge made several errors during trial regarding what witness testimony would and would not be allowed. But the Supreme Court said Friday it found no error on the part of the judge, keeping Anthony behind bars. Another former Omaha police officer, meanwhile, sentenced in federal court for his role in the Omaha public corruption scandal. Thursday, Johnny Palermo was sentenced to 24 months in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. He was also ordered to pay over $65,000 in restitution. Palermo pleaded guilty in January to one charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. That's the same charge for which former Omaha City Councilman Vinny Palermo, of no relation to Johnny, and Richie Gonzalez were sentenced to federal prison earlier this year. Authorities say the conspiracy involved Johnny and Richie spending Latino Peace Officers Association money on trips for themselves to Vegas and other destinations, while bringing Vinny Palermo along for the ride. Well, many signs have been pointing lately to a thriving U.S. economy. Experts have been, as a result, predicting interest rate cuts, but recent inflation numbers have many pushing back predictions of when that might happen. And now there are a handful of prominent voices saying that rate hikes might be in the future. Amy Kiley takes a look at why and how the uncertainty affects you.
We ought to go all the way.
A small but growing number of Fed officials and economists say it's possible interest rate hikes could be coming. Fed Governor Michelle Bowman says an increase could be necessary if inflation progress reverses. And the Minneapolis Fed president says a hike is not off the table.
If we stop short, then you all are going to say, well, maybe they're going to stop short next time.
Those are minority Fed views, but the new Consumer Price Index report shows inflation accelerating. That has former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers floating the idea of a rate increase. A wholesale inflation gauge out yesterday is better than expected, but it shows the highest 12-month increase in almost a year.
The one thorn in our side, obviously, is inflation, which has been very hard to vanquish.
The uncertainty is affecting the stock market.
There's so much dissent within the Federal Reserve and their governors coming out at different times. The fact that they don't speak in one voice, and I know they're not supposed to, but it can be so confusing to the marketplace.
It's also creating doubt that loan rates will improve soon,
which many people were expecting, whether to buy a car or to purchase a home in the next few months.
And stubborn inflation itself affects how Americans feel.
Even though Americans' wages overall have lately been outpacing inflation, that still doesn't mean that Americans feel great about their finances.
I'm Amy Kiley reporting.
Well, state lawmakers passed dozens of bills in a marathon session on the second to last day of the 2024 calendar. 103 proposals were approved on Thursday. Among the highlights, Senator Justin Wayne of Omaha's proposal to allow people convicted of felonies to have their voting rights restored immediately after completing their sentence. A package of education bills passed, including a provision that would allow some of the smallest school districts in the state to authorize certain people to carry firearms on school grounds. There were also measures approved designed at limiting foreign ownership of ag land, simplifying child care licensing regulations, and requiring law enforcement to notify sexual assault survivors before they dispose of sexual assault kits. There's one more day of the session, next Thursday the 18th. Not much on the schedule, but if any bills get vetoed by Governor Jim Pillen, overrides could be taken up then. Some teachers say they're not prepared to deal with an active shooter on campus. 1 in 4 say they've experienced a gun-related lockdown in the last year alone. That's according to a new report from the Pew Research Center. As part of a national survey last fall, researchers reached out to more than 2,500 kindergarten to 12th grade teachers, more than half of whom said they were at least somewhat worried about the possibility of a shooting happening at their school. 8% of them said their schools already had more than one gun-related lockdown that year. And it's happening in Nebraska. Earlier this year, 2 school buildings in Kearney were placed in lockdown protocol after a threat was received from a parent. Well, when it comes to transportation, how safe is it where you live? Residents in a southeast Nebraska community had a chance to weigh in on that last night. Doug Kennedy has more.
An open house at the Beatrice Public Library sought input and suggestions as the city develops a Safe Streets for All action plan.
Where maybe they're seeing or they feel as though some folks could improve their driving behavior or their crossing behavior if they're pedestrian or if they're riding their bike, using more appropriate traffic laws, but also just identifying throughout the community where they think there's opportunities for safety improvement.
Mark Luchaharms, a transportation senior project manager for JEO Consulting Group, spoke about one part of the process, looking at areas where crashes most frequently happen and how they may be prevented.
Of course, it's difficult to know the why those crashes are occurring, but certainly speed management is a big component of it. Folks not managing their speeds or not abiding by the speed limits. Certainly distracted driving is another issue. Some of it also might come down to the intersection control, whether there's stop signs or a lack thereof, and maybe better ways to control the intersection. And certainly a lot of times just for geometric improvements to help slow that traffic down on those streets.
The information gained from the open house will be used to help compile a plan with recommendations. Those will be shown at a second public meeting before they are presented to the City Council for approval of a Safe Streets for All action plan. Aside from traffic enforcement, design changes have been used to improve safety and getting the public to adjust to them.
Some people love and some people hate those types of treatments, but there certainly are a wide variety of treatments. Roundabouts is certainly one of them that are proven safety measures. They force traffic to slow down. And when there are crashes, they're very minor in nature. You very seldom see someone killed or even severely injured at those types of intersections. So that certainly could be part of this project of providing more education to folks as to what the benefits of those type of intersection treatments might be.
As more communities see pedestrians, bicycles, scooters, and runners mix with vehicle traffic, Luchaharms said the study seeks to address that.
Traditionally, it's all about widening roads or improving the flow of traffic, and less so about making safe accommodations for walkers and bikers. And so a lot of this is giving some more focus to that and some opportunities to make improvements for those modes of traffic also.
Finalizing a safety action plan is a key step before the city of Beatrice can seek grant funding to implement safety plan components. Luchaharms says there are a number of U.S. Department of Transportation grants that communities can tap into to improve safety, including the Safe Streets for All program.
Beatrice was actually in the first round of applying for that grant money. There's since been a second. Now there's a third round going on right now. So it's only been about a 2.5 year program. So it's still fairly in its infancy.
The Beatrice project timeline calls for advisory group meetings, a second public session in October, with presentation of a final plan to city officials in December. From Beatrice, Doug Kennedy, News Channel, Nebraska.
Norfolk's outgoing mayor being given one of his hometown's highest honors. Norfolk Mayor Josh Moning selected as the 55th winner of the Norfolk Oscar. It's an award given out annually during the Norfolk Area Chamber of Commerce's banquet. Chamber officials cited Moning's efforts in economic development and in growing Norfolk's population in giving him the honor. Moning recently announced that he will not be running for re-election this year. He was a Norfolk City councilman prior to being elected mayor in 2016. A Central Nebraska Utilities Department getting nationally recognized. The city of Hastings says they were honored this week by the American Public Power Association for achieving exceptional electric reliability in 2023. That means they ranked in the top 25% of publicly owned utilities for keeping the power on over a 5-year period. The APPA is a trade group that represents over 2,000 public utilities. And one of Southeast Nebraska's very own is set to take part in one of the biggest events in the sport of running. Jake Bartecki has more.
The distance between Beatrice, Nebraska and Boston, Massachusetts measures somewhere around 1,500 miles, but a Southeast Nebraska pastor will make that trek to run 26.2 miles. Pastor Darren Vaughn of St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Beatrice is set to run the 7th marathon of his career, and it happens to be one of the most prestigious in all of running.
Running, I never was in track or anything like that, so it was something where just from high school on, I ran, I guess you could say, recreationally off and on.
What started out as a hobby has turned into a passion for Bond. In training for the Boston Marathon, he follows a 5-week training regimen, registering about 75 miles of running per week. The Boston Marathon will be his first big city marathon. Bond says being a pastor is a time-consuming job, but one that allows ample time for training.
I do work a lot of hours as a pastor, but is flexible very often. So, like today, I could rearrange my schedule for a morning run, and that was not a problem. So that is kind of a little benefit that comes along with being a pastor, I guess.
Bond says running can be a time for self-reflection.
For me to relieve stress, to unwind, also as a pastor to have time for prayer as I pray for my congregation members and for God to lead me. It is perfect. I never bring headphones. It's always just a chance for really alone time with God, I guess you could say.
As Bond gets set for the big run, the congregation and Beatrice communities are going above and beyond to support one of their own.
So it's been huge. The church has They gathered a collection for our family to be able to go to Boston. They have been keeping us in prayers. They're super supportive, and you know, when I run a race, they want to know how I did, and so that's always so exciting that they're just so invested in it, and they want to know how to follow me in the Boston, even my confirmation.
Now, Pastor Bond says his family and himself are ready to make the trip out east. They plan to leave on Saturday for the marathon on a Monday morning. Reporting in Beatrice, Jake Bartecki, News Channel, Nebraska.
And you can stay up to date with the very latest by following us online. Head to newschannelnebraska.com, click on the News tab there. You can also follow us on X, like us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great day. You're watching News Channel Nebraska.